So, welcome to the Harris Armstrong Lecture, and which will be delivered today by Mimi Hoang, and co-founding partner of the Brooklyn-based architecture firm nArchitects, a firm Mimi and her partner Eric Bunge co-founded in 1999, with the mission towards a positive impact on society and the environment. Through acknowledging the interdependence between architecture, landscape, ecology, and the human interaction. And following this line of thinking, their projects address contemporary issues related to housing, cultural institutions, and civic space, with the intention to bring a deep sensitivity to how we live, work, and activate these spaces. This is in particular in response to our nation's changing demographics, housing shortages, evolving workplace technologies, and the need for equal engagement in the public realm. And some of their notable projects who address these topics include the New York State Equal Rights Heritage Center, the Jones Beach Energy and Nature Center, and a 36-acre Made in New York campus in Brooklyn, among many other projects. In addition to practicing architecture, Mimi is also engaged in the academic realm. She's an adjunct professor teaching architecture in the past at Yale and currently at Columbia University. And while she's teaching there, she taught advanced option studios and coordinated the core housing studio at Columbia graduate level. So nArchitects also received many honors and awards, such as, I'm going to only mention a couple of them because there's so many. So the 2023 National Design Award in Architecture, the AIA New York State Firm of the Year Award, an AIA National Institute Honor Award, the Architectural League of New York's Emerging Voices, and the Canadian Professional Rome Prize, among many, many other awards, as I just mentioned. So nArchitect has been published also in the national and international press, and that includes, and I'm also going to mention a couple of them, that's the New York Times, the New Yorker, Chicago Tribune, Architect Magazine, Architectural Record, the Architectural Review, Domos, Metropolis, and Praxis, among many, many other venues. And Mimi and her partner, Eric, also co-authored a book, and including the book that's actually for sale right now outside, called Building and Almost Buildings, which we brought today and also tomorrow when we all meet at Kina Court. We're going to bring the book back for you for purchase. So Mimi, we're super happy that you can be here with us at Sam Fox School today, and to hear more of the work that you and Eric actually have created over the last 2 decades. And yeah, please help me to welcome Mimi Hoang.
Hello, good evening. Can you all hear me? I'm very honored to be here. I've never been here, but I feel like I've had a connection because I've seen a lot of very good portfolios because I do admissions at Columbia, and we have 2 employees who are from WashU, which is a lot because we only have 12. So thank you for having me. This is us. This is not as often as we like, but this is our lunch hour. We are in Brooklyn. We are a very small office who thinks big. This is us looking at the city that we love. We've been practicing there for almost 25 years. And at this point, we are super proud to be working on a lot of projects that are intersecting in terms of making cities more livable and more viable. And so I thought that I would talk about these projects loosely organized into home, work, and public space. A sociologist would look at this diagram and understand that home is first space, work is second space, and public realm is third space. We see them very, very interconnected. And really what we are talking about is livability. What makes cities livable, from your home space to where you work to where you gather? What are the obstacles to making cities livable, and how do we respond? The subtext for the talk is also a lot of reading that I've been doing mainly voices from minority communities and women in literature and history and environmental fiction, to kind of really think about how we practice, how we teach, how we communicate our ethics to society at large, and how do we respond to this time, this very fragile time of extreme environmental climate crisis, extreme social inequity. How do we respond as architects and educators, and how do we stay positive and think about architecture as the agent for and the catalyst for change? The other subtext is that Petra asked me to talk about failures, which is such a good prompt. And I'm going to expand that into failures, redo, missed opportunities that then become opportunities, and serendipitous accidents, because after 25 years of practice, this is kind of what practice looks like to us, sometimes aligned, sometimes totally on opposite pages, going around and around in circles, rehearsing the same objectives. How do we live together better? How do we connect each other, to our environment, and to our and to nature? So before I start talking about our housing projects, I need to first talk about failure. One that was very instrumental in how we thought about housing afterwards. So the first kind of failure that I want to talk about is this competition that we did for the Living Steel Association for affordable housing in Wuhan, China, which is one of the 5 furnaces of China, very, very, very hot. And so we proposed this slab building. We thought about how to distribute the so-called wealth of programmatic volume. So we thought, why should the top floor be the best one because it has the better view? Why don't we kind of recalibrate that? And so we gave the greater ceiling heights to the lower floors, and the shorter ceiling heights to the top floors, so that the volume of each apartment is more or less the same. And so we thought that that would be this fantastic idea for intergenerational housing typology, and also thought, we can shift it around to create neighborhoods, mini neighborhoods, every couple of floors. We can even shuffle them around, one developer might like one mix and another might like another. And we thought about it in a modular sense, that each screen, each line of the envelope would do something different, and it would be modular and it would be customizable. So you can kind of see the gradient of the townhouses to the flats up above, which were allowed to slide around because the plumbing is all on one wall. We didn't win, we lost, and there was something very, very succinct about the jury comments. Single-loaded corridors that are open to the outside look poor. And we thought, what? What? But it's great for the environment, it's great for passive ventilation, blah, 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 blah. And we realized we thought about the environment, and we kind of, maybe solved for the physical context, but we didn't understand the social context, what we couldn't see. And so we kept thinking about that, and that is pervasive throughout. And so a lot of my recent reading is about really understanding how did we get here? What are the forces that create neighborhoods in terms of migration, et cetera? How are neighborhoods accessible or not accessible? And one thing that was really inspiring for me, particularly in the Isabel Wilkerson book, the way in which she weaves the individual intimate narrative within the context of much broader historical narratives was really fascinating, and we think about that in architectural space, how to do that in architectural space. So this is our Carmel place. I think you would see this better if some of the lights came down, but it's up to you. This is the result of a competition, an open competition that was jointly held by the City Planning Commission and the Housing and Development Corporation Mayor's Office. Really manual. Okay, guys, this is so worth it. So worth it. This is Google Earth, and now we're in the east side of Manhattan. This is where all the hospitals are, and we are in this brick bowl. So worth it, right? Okay, that's our site. But I wanted to show you where it was and this kind of brick bowl that we're in and the adjacency to the public housing. So, as I mentioned, it's a pilot project. The city and all cities are grappling with a housing shortage and a kind of mismatch between the housing stock that we have and the demographics of who we are now. But the story starts with Jacob Riis, who was a photojournalist who turned his cameras onto the immigrant poor at the turn of the century and showed how, you know, at this point, almost half of the city was living below the poverty line and did not have access to leases, to light and air, to proper ventilation, to proper plumbing. And so it's important to know that Jacob Riis's work then shocked the civic leadership into action, and so all of our housing regulations, the minimum size of apartments, the minimum size of windows, the minimum size of rooms, all of that is predicated on his work. The disconnect is that the American home has been almost doubling since the 50s, but the American family as a unit has been fractured and is shrinking. And so this is who we are. We are not a nuclear family, but the housing code is built for the nuclear family. And it's not just New York, it's national, that there has been greater and greater percentage of people living by themselves or in small households. There are many reasons for this. Women are marrying later, are more educated, working more, people are eating more healthy, living longer, etc. It's not just us, it's also internationally, but this is a trend. And so the city spearheaded the competition as a test. Should we shrink the minimum size of apartments down from 400 square feet? And so this was our competition entry. That was the rendering, fastest ever public housing competition to reality because it was on the mayor's timeline. But this is the final project. Partly we won it because of modular. I will get to that. For us, it was not just a challenge of making a 350 square foot apartment feel good. We had to do that. But we were also thinking about what else needs to change about apartment living, about multifamily residences, because I'm sure you've read there's a loneliness epidemic also. And so we thought we have to disperse things that you might find in a bigger apartment around the building, but really locate them in areas that would encourage social interaction. And so the gym, we begged the developer, don't put it in the basement. It's so nasty. Put it with daylight. So the gym is kind of like a porch. The lobby is super wide so that they can have a Thanksgiving dinner with the whole building. The cafe also opens out onto that porch. More failures because Petra asked for it. This was great for a while, and then the developer changed it. I'll get to that. This is us. This is the brick bowl. We were trying to really stitch the building into its landscape, into its context, from the dark brick on one side to the light brick on the other. We had two construction sites. One was in the modular factory, and the other one was the site itself, which was built in situ, regular construction up to the second floor. So this is the modular factory, and this is basically a timeline of production where it starts here and goes out the factory there. And so you can kind of see it starts with a chassis, a steel chassis, with a concrete slab poured onto it. These are the structural HSSs, hollow steel, that's peg into each other, and you can kind of see how things get a little bit more complete. And by the time it leaves the factory, midnight, so that there's no traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge, everything is in place. The finished floor is in place, all of the drywall except the hallway side. The plumbing fixtures are in the mechanical appliances are in, the lights, everything except for the brick. So you can kind of see the insulation is there. It arrives shrink wrapped. And those HSSs that you saw, they are hollow. There's a tab inside, and they literally go in like Legos. The units, all the prefab units, so each apartment is one unit. The stair and elevator were also units. This stacking process took 3.5 weeks, which makes it sound really easy. It was not easy at all. And then afterwards, all the hookups and all the connections in between the floors happen. This is a typical floor. These are the typical units. So you can see that each prefab unit is the apartment and a little bit of the corridor. And then the elevator and the stair is also a prefab unit. What you also see is that all the bathrooms and the kitchen connects into it. They're all on the corridor side. It's because all the drywall is closed before it gets shipped. The drywall on the corridor side is left open so that when the stacking happens, after everything is stacked, and from the corridor side, all the pipes are in, but all the connections in between the floors happen on site. Also the cladding, the brick cladding happens on site. Which is just specific to that system. So in these kinds of drawings, we're trying to reveal our so-called secrets, not so secret. Inside, the average square foot of the unit is 350 square feet. Some of them were furnished for previously homeless veterans. And so you can kind of see the flexibility. Back to volume. The volume question is interesting. So the minimum size of apartment before this was 400 square feet. We shrank it by 25%. But the ceiling heights in here are 9.8. So if you compare the volume of a minimum new built, where the ceiling height is the 8-foot minimum, we've shrunk the volume by 10%, which I think makes a big difference. The windows are actually 8-foot tall sliding doors. They go all the way down to the floor because we really wanted to connect the kind of experience of living in a small unit to the park outside and the pedestrian park outside also. For the students, we call this our living drawing. We've been experimenting with these as a way to show the kind of objective information that we're interested in, the objective and the technical, but also to try to show life and sometimes time. So this is us imagining the life of this apartment building. There are 66 units, 40% are affordable. So that leaves 22 apartments for affordable. Out of those, 8 went to formerly homeless veterans, so that leaves not very many. I can't do math and talk at the same time. 14 maybe. So for those 14 apartments, there were 60,000 applications to the NYC HPD, which is a very, very sad and depressing fact and just points to the need for more affordable housing. So it was very important for us that even though the units inside were small, that they were not expressed on the outside. We didn't want the expression of the micro unit. Everything on the outside is supersized. The windows are 8 feet tall. The bricks are larger than typical bricks. And you can see here this kind of stitching that we were after. The massing is like 4 slender towers. We wanted to feel like New York, which is very much a brick landscape. Okay, back to the gym. It lasted for a while, and then they brought in something that was less good. I can't remember. I kind of block out bad news. They took out the gym that was for the tenants, stuck it in the basement, and put in some, I think it's like ping pong, or one of these tech bro inventions of like ping pong, but you pay a lot of money for it. So I count that as a failure, a mini one. Not that there is anything that we can do, but I'm kind of thinking about it. Like, what do we do to bake in these decisions, you know, so that they stay? But it's the reality, and so we just move on. We finished that in 2016. We tried. We've been trying to do more affordable housing. This one is in the Bronx. This is for seniors, assisted living. We partnered with this South Bronx United, which is actually soccer, after-school soccer plus homework help. And we thought that that was an amazing intergenerational idea, that the soccer would be for the kids in the public housing, and above that would be this garden, rooftop garden for the seniors living there, and it would be this amazing intergenerational complex. So you can see how much space that indoor soccer field takes, and there are not many in the city. We lost this one. The winning scheme had more units, and the community partner was not recreation, it was healthcare. So that was also, you know, an interesting lesson that, of course, we couldn't know it before, but it's interesting to think about, you know, what brings value to projects like this. We thought that it was a kind of, you know, caring for intergenerational, you know, age groups, and what was successful was really honing in on the seniors and providing more units. And that is where, at the end of the day, something like this takes up way too much space, and the winning scheme had something like 15% more units than ours. On to the next one. This one we submitted in 2021. It took them 2 years to tell us that we won. But this is also for an affordable housing project, also seniors in Brooklyn. It is next to a park. And I think one of the strengths of the project is the way in which the building kind of, you know, deflects towards the park. So the park is on the side. But we gave this space up for the public, and you can kind of see the building kind of, you know, kind of like leans back and opens itself up to the park. We're waiting for this to continue, but the news that we suddenly heard was the Parks Commissioner hates that, does not want the park to open to the building at all. So we're going to try. We're going to still try. We think we're right. Another project that we're waiting on, this was an open competition for Chicago called Chicago Come Home. For us, it was extremely interesting the way that they thought about this, which was that they're trying to fill in the missing middle, which is the smaller lots, the smaller vacant lots. Chicago, since the 90s, the Black population has been fleeing. So from the 90s, it's down by 25%. Many reasons: redlining, racism, lack of opportunity, terrible schools, segregation, etc. What it has done is that it has left these neighborhoods with a lot of missing teeth, which just makes it extremely unsafe. So you can kind of see the amount of vacant lots which feel unsafe. It really, you know, is detrimental to a kind of sense of neighborhood, to a sense of belonging. And so we took on the typology of the 6-flat, which is typically like this, but with another floor. So basically, it's 3 apartments, a very formal entrance. We were all assigned different typologies. And for us, we called our project The Middle Ground, because we wanted to also work on the space between home and your street or your commercial district, because the first phase of the project focused on the commercial district. So the city decided they're going to focus on where people can buy groceries and get their amenities, and then the second phase is all of these empty lots, the missing teeth. So these are the typical 6-flat, entering in the middle. What this plan does is that you only get light and air out the ends, and these are pretty compromised views, and these are very, very formal rooms that are not really the kinds of rooms that we use now. So in our formulation, we devised a townhouse stacked on this side and then through floor apartments on the other side, again, hoping for intergenerational living communities. And we moved the stair to the front so that there are more eyes on the street for safer streets. And so this typology of the bay window that is very, very prevalent in Chicago, we kind of flipped it and made it the more informal spaces. The stair with eyes on the front door and a kind of porch, balcony, Zoom room, whatever, from the inside. And in this way, trying to create a kind of in-between space, in between home and the street, and to create more visibility and safer streets with the activity of arriving and departing. Second space, workspace. We are working on different ideas of work typology. I'm mainly interested in the non-laptop crowd because I think we have a lot of WeWorks in the world and we don't really need more, and also because this is part of an initiative from the city. New York has lost a lot of its manufacturing space and along with that, the work of skilled workers. And so I've been thinking a lot about the intersection of livability in terms of home space and workspace and all the ways in which, whether for rent, lack of space, et cetera, that the working class has not had access to affordable housing and to actual workspace. So one example of that is the garment district in New York, which used to be on Fifth Avenue. They were pushed out because the Rockefellers thought that it was unsightly to have garment workers next to Tiffany's. And so the garment district pushed out to west of Fifth Avenue and built an entire district where the fashion designers, the sewers, the button makers, the zipper makers, everybody was in that district. It's a really, really vibrant district. That district is now pushing them out even further because that district has become the gallery district. And so now they're being pushed further to the waterfront. And so this is part of a larger initiative called the Made in New York initiative aimed at keeping manufacturing. And the reason why this is so contentious is because our waterfronts, which were industrial spaces, very, very dangerous, environmentally toxic spaces, are now very valuable public spaces and also are very valuable for housing. So there's a lot of competing demands. And so this is our project, the renovation of 2 buildings for garment and for light manufacturing. And it is called, it's a campus that is called Bush Terminal because at the time that it was built, turn of the century, it was a revolutionary intermodal shipping, transport, storage. Brooklyn was the breadbasket of the country, and it stored most of the dry goods of the country. And so, but with the introduction of air freight, all of this has slowly disappeared. And so here's our site. These are the 2 buildings that we're renovating. And over time, the buildings that were on the piers have slowly disappeared, literally sinking into the water. And now those buildings that didn't front the waterfront are now on the waterfront. And so these are the people who we are designing for. Largely immigrant class of sewers and cutters and people who make things. This is a historic photo of the building as it used to stand. It was never meant to be occupied by people. It was a storehouse. So you can kind of understand the goods came in through those doors from the water out directly onto the rail. And so this is what we were left with. At some point, somebody cut these large ribbon windows, but it was something like this, very closed on the ground floor. And so we kind of introduced new cuts respecting the rhythm of the facade, introducing new cuts to create a new interior street that connects the street to the waterfront. It's a worm's eye axle of this. It's under construction, slowly getting there. So this concrete, it was one of the first uses of concrete spandrel. We are in dialogue with it, with these new ultra-high performance concrete panels that ripple, evoking fabric, things like that. This is one of the cuts, looking up at the soffit, which will reflect the activity below. Slowly getting there. And this is from the waterfront edge, and just to show you kind of the pressure of doing public space, but also keeping the industrial nature of it still active. On a different waterfront, not far from it, was our ADO Design Center, which was it ended up being a kind of incubator space, design center for innovators, tinkerers, funded by BMW Mini, and it was the renovation of this very humble warehouse, which is fantastic because, you can do whatever. We like ugly buildings that we can cut into, and so all those existing windows, we made them all larger. The proportion of the loading dock doors that are everywhere in this neighborhood. It's a neighborhood of manufacturers and makers. We cut into the building. This is our, it's always a kind of question for us. What can we give back to the neighborhood? This is the smallest park. But this it was a way in which to bring people in. All that brick that came out to create those big openings went back into the remaking of the area around the openings. The bricklayers were about to paint it, and we said, stop, and said, just do it, just do whatever you want to do. Just put it back completely randomly. And this, for us, is the joy of kind of coming onto site and finding, opportunities to let go of a little bit of control and to collaborate a little bit with builders. So this is the entry in, a kind of time lapse of those openings, that little porch entry for events to spill out onto, and the window into the restaurant. And for us, the windows were also about re-seeing the neighborhood in a different way, because this whole neighborhood is full of very closed factories, and so we wanted to position these openings in a way that would reframe the view. It's another living drawing. The client, so there's a restaurant here. This is free space with free Wi-Fi, so it was kind of like, a free WeWork. A kind of incubator, this is the incubator space, this is the accelerator, workshop space, classrooms, retail that sold the work of the designers in that space. It's this whole ecosystem. The client said, no walls, no walls. And we said, you need some walls, you need some acoustic separation. We cannot have the restaurant open to the office space. There's building code, etc. But we did our best to get rid of walls as much as possible. And in lieu of walls, 4 layers of acoustic curtains. So this is the view from the restaurant into that free space, and the free space back to the restaurant. And above the free space, a periscope. They hosted about 200 events a year, which was fascinating and so rewarding for us. Art, book talks, bad art, and above all of that, a periscope, which started out as a joke because the client was from Munich, and initially they wanted to be up on the roof with a view of Manhattan. But we had to break to them the bad news that you are in a manufacturing zone, so you cannot occupy the roof, and also you don't have money for an elevator or for that roof deck. But don't worry, we will bring Manhattan to you. So this is a big skylight, 45-degree angle. One is a reflection of Wythe Avenue, which is an important avenue in Brooklyn, and the other is of Manhattan. So you get the Chrysler Building and Wythe Avenue, and the reflection of the public artwork of the roof, reflecting down into the space. And so these are all from the client who really got what we were trying to do, which was to capture this endlessly, interesting light and activity, etc., and to create surprise. The last bay was actually an interior space, and we convinced them to rip the roof off and to invite people to do installations. And so the first one was by Assemble Collective from London. This is one from United Visual Artists, which made us really happy because we felt that they were in dialogue with our project, which is exactly what we wanted to happen, to leave our projects always a little bit incomplete, and to be made complete by somebody else. But also for us, there's a good reason why these kind of manufacturing spaces were on the periphery of the cities, environmental pollution, etc. And now that these post-industrial areas are being inhabited, we want to make work, specifically, manufacturing work, participatory and much more visible. The last section, I have no idea how I'm doing on time. Somebody shout if I go over too long. The last section is about publics, publics with a plural, because we are not designing for a universal body, but for many bodies, sometimes contradictory. Before I get into our more recent work, I need to rewind to talk about how we got there, which was a lot of design build temporary installations that we did ourselves, which gave us a lot of confidence in our more traditionally commissioned work. So this is PS1 out of Green Bamboo, where we were really interested in taking something that was a living material and that was supple, that like literally bent, and making it rigid. And also to create microclimates with shade, with water, and for those microclimates to create very distinct zones for lounging without walls. During its short lifespan where it was up, we kept looking at this section, which would kind of, rise and fall with the wind. It was really lovely. There was another section that was flopping, that we had to add another one of these dips, which is literally a structural failure that we had to solve. But this one was almost failing, but it was great, because it was rising and falling. We thought, that would be so cool to, do an installation that changed with the wind. And so we tried it in the south of France. This is in a town called Lacoste. This is where the Marquis de Sade escaped from prison. And in medieval times, the wind is so strong during the summer months that crimes of passion would be forgiven during this time. And so we thought, why don't we make something that literally takes on a new shape with the wind? And so we called it Wind Shape. And it was very difficult to build in this incredibly beautiful town because everything had to be literally, pulled in from a hand cart. And so it's all PVC pipes, 8 feet long, and miles of polypropylene string. We kind of got what we wished for, but a bit too much, because 2 days before the opening, we were hit with a storm, And we were watching from actually this vantage point, you know, just wringing our hands going, oh my God, because the thing was, you know, like doing this and literally, and we were done. We were almost done. And we literally saw the thing disappear behind this wall because it had, we thought the whole thing had fallen over, and we were like, oh crap. But it sprang back up, and it was unbelievable. And all we had to do was, you know, tighten a bit, you know, some of the strings. But yes, we almost got a little bit too much of what we asked for. But so that was interesting, and that was a lesson in, you know, how much nature do you want in your work? You know, how much is too much? But we tried the bamboo thing again. The wind shape project became, we didn't know what the purpose of it would be, but they ended up using it for gatherings all the time. And so the next one we thought, we wanted to design a polycentric pavilion, one where the audience and the spectator flips back and forth. So this is in Hualien, Taiwan. It's home of Aboriginal tribes called the Amis. And another kind of, you know, point of almost failure was the Taipei crew that was hired to build this said, no way, that bamboo does not, you know, like, we can't build this, et cetera, et cetera. The Amis were very, very excited because they build with bamboo, not in this form, but they build with bamboo. And so we separated the construction site. Taipei crew did the deck and the foundations, and the Amis did the vaults. And we went out there, we taught them our methods from PS1, lots of trial and error, etc. There are 11 vaults that are staggered and leaning up against each other, forming two concentric rings. And the reason why it was important was because the Amis, their singing and dancing is very, very much part of how they come together as a community. But it's not very formal. So I might be on the so-called stage, but you might be heckling me or, you know, participating in a call back. And so the idea was that performance is either under the vault, in the middle, that relationship between performance and spectatorship flips constantly. The Amis, it was supposed to be only up for the summer. The Amis really, really loved it. They took care of it. So it was actually up for 4 years. They repaired it. They just kept, you know, repairing it and fixing the broken pieces. And the ultimate compliment, they asked us if they could replicate it. And we said, yes, of course. So that was a long story to get to actually the public projects that we're doing now, but all of that is in our DNA. So that kind of, you know, thinking about how people behave in public space, how to create moments of intimacy within a larger public space, it is there. But now our briefs are much more complicated, and our briefs are asking us to think about the impact of architecture on animal, plant, habitat, on nature, et cetera. So I've been doing a lot of reading, eco-fiction, thinking about the inequity to healthy air and healthy water, et cetera. It has helped me manage my anxiety about climate change, but it's also really difficult because when I read the overstory, I thought, crap, we can't use wood either, you know. So it's very easy to kind of, you know, feel defeated. Literally, we can't use anything, can't pour concrete, too much embodied energy, can't use steel, it's coming from abroad, can't use wood, etc. But still, we have to try and to think about how to be better stewards of our environment. So this is the Resiliency Park Pavilion in Hoboken. Hoboken is very low-lying, Hoboken, New Jersey. If it rains 1/4 of an inch, the entire neighborhood floods. And so this project is for a park Underneath the park, the stormwater detention tanks hold 1 million gallons of stormwater, and then the ground of the park holds another 750,000. And the building is the icing on the cake, but it is positioned in between all these zones of the park, the recreation, the bioswale, kind of natural habitat part, and the passive lawn, and this more formal terrace. It is a gigantic hat on top of 2 small volumes. It's our way of trying to blur the boundary between architecture and the outside. It's our way of pulling park activities in underneath the canopy. The columns are disguised. I call them Dr. Seuss trees. It's a way of connecting the columns to the trees in the park at large. And one volume is a cafe and the other is an open community room. None of that was in the brief. The brief was, can you please design a nice bathroom building for the park? And we said, sure, but you need something else. You need some place for the parents when they drop off their kids. You need caffeine. There's no library, anywhere here. How about an annex? And so this is, our reality of never quite taking the program brief literally. These are some construction shots. We haven't shot it yet, but kind of gives you an idea of that kind of space in between, and very exciting circular shadows that I hadn't anticipated, and this layered space from the inside to the outside, back to the inside again, that we are obsessed with. Chicago Navy Pier is a 1 kilometer long pier. I'm sure many of you have been here. I'm from Chicago, so this is my second home. And I knew that no Chicagoan goes to Navy Pier because it's a tourist trap. So really our mission, and before it became this, it was everything from a military depot to a university. But this was our existing condition, the People's Pier. Very, very packed, full of everything that, full of kiosks and boats, and you actually never saw the lake because it was so crammed with stuff. So part of our job was to just declutter and to return the experience of the lake back to the pier. So one of the series of structures that we did was the Lake Pavilion. Literally, what if you just take a slice of the lake and float it above you? Because it's pretty amazing how the lake freezes in the winter and is really Caribbean blue in the summer. And we wanted to, really make the moment of arrival and departure always different for Chicagoans. And so one side of this geometry reflects the lake and the other side reflects the activity on the dock. And really it changes depending on winter to summer. And more importantly, providing shade, a moment of respite, and a place to see the lake. At the beginning of the pier, if you were there in the 90s, you would have seen a red gate, which did everything to announce, this is Navy Pier and it's different from the rest of Chicago. And so we ripped that out and we designed instead this information tower. The bottom of it gives the day's programming. But we were very consciously playing with the skyline and trying to create a kind of mini-me of the Chicago skyscrapers, but it's only 45 feet tall. So it really works to really connect the marginalized space of the pier back to the city and vice versa. It is clad with chrome, glass with a chrome interlayer. There's more and more chrome the higher the tower goes. And so as you look up, it kind of disappears into the clouds or it reflects the whatever is going on, including the lights. So in a new moon, the light of the info tower is very dim. And with a full moon, it's brighter. It's just one way in which we're always trying to connect, however small, what we're doing with some larger scale of the environment. The biggest structure is the wave wall, which is inspired by the Spanish Steps. It looks like one singular gesture. It's all prefab because the pier had to remain open during construction. And so it is, this is some from photos from the factory. The mock-ups proved to us that actually we could reduce the depth of the louver by a third, which saved a lot of material, saved costs, etc. But this is the scale of the cassettes that go in. Quite complicated. This is kind of from our book, a series of collages that we've been trying to do to try to get at that experience of time in architecture, whether it's about construction or about sequence. And this is it from above. From above, it's an overlook. We wanted to get a little bit closer to the lake, and below it's an F&B. And so basically it goes from a louvered wall, cantilevered for shade, and cants back for the stair. And in all of these ways are just us trying to, re-engage the pier with the lake to connect it back to the city. The last public project, it's not the last project, I don't want to get your hopes up. The last public project is this Jones Beach Nature and Energy Center that we did out in Long Island. It's net zero. That's our site. It really feels like the end, the very, very, very end of New York. This is a good Robert Moses legacy, where he built this barrier island. And this bathhouse, which is actually not this. This is the very popular, very populous end of the beach. But where we are, it's a nature preserve. There are bike trails. There's lots of birders. And if you can see way in the distance, a 1960s bathhouse by SOM that is fully in the floodplain. So when we inherited the project, it was a retrofit of that bathhouse. But we quickly realized that we had to raise it, and it would be cheaper to build a new building. This line was the line of the former parking lot. We chopped almost half of it out. Moses loved parking lots, really, really big ones. But we chopped most of it out, and we used the rubble. The rubble never left the site. We used the rubble to create the bioswale gardens and to raise the building up above the floodplain. So, but also, more importantly, we wanted the view from the building to be of the beach, not of the parking lot. We couldn't move the building because of the floodplain. So what we ended up doing was, because we couldn't move the building and the existing building was too small, we ended up growing the building in length, but reusing those existing piles. So it is education, nature education, classrooms and exhibits. At one point, we inherited two funding sources, New York State Parks and the local power authority. And they both wanted their own thing, their own exhibit, their own classroom. And we said, you don't have the money for 20,000 square foot, double program. And so we convinced them that there is a very interesting conversation to be had between energy and nature, and what can you share? Can you share offices? Can you share the multipurpose room? And we convinced them to share their brief and to share their program. So so on this side is nature, exhibit, and programming, and this side is energy. And so the closed rooms are the lower volumes, and the exhibits are running in between. This is maybe a table of failures. This is our typical landscape of inefficiencies, where we are just, in this case, trying to figure out how to break up the 330-foot-long building into moments. And so this is showing how the light monitors, those are above the exhibit space, and the flat ceilings are the offices and classrooms and anything that needed to be enclosed. And then this is the cross-section showing that all of the exhibits are linked by this long corridor that is open to the beach side. You see the outdoor classroom, and this is a cut through one of those light monitors. This is the beach side. And so for us, education is inside and is outside, in the form of these kinds of outdoor classrooms and in the form of the exhibit elements that are stretched all along the trellis that wraps around the building. And the exhibit starts in the lobby when you arrive with this exhibit, which is the exhibit about the building and how it is net zero. But the view that you see, you never saw before. Now you are 7 feet up, and now you see the beach. It was exhibited at MoMA as part of this show called New York, New Publics, looking at new kinds of public spaces and the kinds of amenities that they are offered. And I wanted to show you the movie from that, or film, short film from... This is by film artist Hudson Lyons. This is a whole new bioswale garden made with the rubble. Somewhere in this garden here is the battery that runs the building. So the kind of the building systems becomes part of the content of the exhibition. And so all around is all the native plants.
Secretly get a bite. My house. You have to go left.
It's the porch facing the beach.
So, we are going to be walking around Jones Beach Energy and Nature Center, measuring wind in order to figure out where the best spot would be to build a wind turbine.
We work closely with the director who wrote an entire STEM program based off of this program to teach
this is not a wind
school
turbine,
kids,
it's a wind turbine blade.
elementary school through high school.
Wind meters at the ready.
That wind blade,
Three,
you may have
two,
seen it. That's
one,
right next
click.
to the building. This is part of a very long bike trail. So the building is right off of this bike trail that connects to the other parts of the beach.
You guys saw the solar panels on the roof of the building, yes? Wait. But there's a lot of
This is the exhibit on the animal side.
Text the mainland.
We nicknamed this the Chalet for All because we are always trying to figure out how to kind of create a sense of belonging, a sense that you can make yourself at home, to rock up on your bike and sit on that porch without really going inside, maybe. And so we think about this idea of home a lot, whether we are working on first space or third space. And so I wanted to return to the idea of home for the last project, but again, I need to show you some failures before I get to that last project. And it starts with this home for no one. We were hired by Ai Weiwei to design a 10,000 square foot villa in China. Coming from New York, we really had no idea how to design 10,000 square foot home. And we thought, who needs that? And so we designed a house within a house. Because of the extreme desert climate, it's very, very hot during the day and very, very cold at night. And so the inner house is wrapped inside an outer house. The 3 floors of the inner house are oriented to different parts of the landscape, and they stack on top of each other. And so you get these views where, simultaneously of an inner house that is more finished, more polished, fully heated and conditioned, and this outer house that is much rougher, built with the cheaper bricks, with only skylights, and is not really conditioned or cooled, and it's kind of in between. The developer fell out of favor with the government, was exiled in London, and so we did these depressing construction-like renderings to show an abandoned construction site, dealing with our loss, but also kind of really pushing the idea of, how rough can this space be? Anyway, we were still obsessed with this idea of an inner building wrapped around an outer building, and so we tried it again. Oh, sorry, before that, we built this thermal model for the Seoul Design Olympiad, which shows through the different color of temperature dots, the idea of the different climactic zones and how this thermal logic organizes the house. Okay, so we built that to deal with our loss, and then we tried it again for the Shanghai library competition. This is 1 million square feet. And we thought about the libraries that we love, the intimate libraries that we love, and the oldest library, which is this one in Tianyige, where the book floor is above the garden reading room. And the reading room is very connected to the garden. And so that became our sectional DNA that we replicated in order to break down the scale of the building. So there are these pairs of lower height book floors and in between more expansive floors, each floor a different plan configuration, which produces these multiple height spaces in between, very similar to Villa Villa. And so the circulation connects you to these more expansive floors, and the double layer facade is in an inner garden, etc. We were told that we won. But then we were told, actually, your competition was not the real competition. The real competition are these architects, and so actually we didn't win anything. So we built a model, which is what we do to process our grief, but also, no, I'm being facetious. We build models of ideas that we like, because those models hang around for a very long time. And so finally, we did a diet version of all of that with this house, CLT House in upstate New York, which is 2 floors, not 3, and is 1,800 square feet, not 10,000. But it's basically a very simple core on the ground floor and a plus shape on the upper floor. And so you get these double height spaces at every corner. So this is moving from the ground up. So that's the core with all the living space all around. And then the bedrooms each face a different orientation with different light qualities. And so you can kind of see each corner, it's a double height space with some element, a stair, the fireplace, a skylight, and living is very much in the round. So you can see that in the section. So we're cutting through one of those bedrooms, the corners, and this kind of very compressed space between the middle core and the exterior wall really kind of brings the landscape in. Everything is CLT. There's 98% of the walls are CLT, 2% is drywall. It was our goal to get rid of drywall. The exterior walls, the interior walls are 3 inches thick. The floor and the roof is 5 inches thick because those have the longer spans. This crew is based out of, I think, Connecticut or Massachusetts, and they travel around the country setting this exact CLT system, because each system is proprietary and you can only have it set by those who are certified to set it. And so this, the slab on grade is concrete, no basement. It's very interesting how it went up. The core and then the walls that support the floor, the plus shape of the floor, and then the second floor, and then the non-load supporting walls of the double height space. That took 11 days, 2 men, amazing. And then they flew off to Portland to set the next project. And so you can kind of see, some of the straps on the outside to hold it in place, but mostly they're held by the anchors, angles inside that we subsequently hid. Oh, okay. The project was finished with corrugated metal cladding in the construction drawings. After we had started, at some point, we realized, this was during COVID also, we realized that the metal prices were going up and up, and it wasn't in anybody's control. And so we switched in the middle of construction to this, which is live board, or waney board, or wavy board, lots of names for it. It's an old English technique that the settlers brought. If you cut a tree radially and you leave the bark side as is, this is kind of what you get. And so we were really excited that on the inside is the newest wood building technique. And on the outside, it's the very oldest technique. Because we built with CLT, there is no wall cavity. So that wall and all the walls are just 3 inches thick. There's no hollow space inside. And so we, very inspired by Leverance, did our own kind of, we call them light vines for some of the electrical. Otherwise, the only recessed lights that we have are in these kind of ceiling spaces. All the outlets are in the floor, or they're exposed like that. There's another mistake, failure that became something really awesome. So you see those 2 streaks? One of them is the real light coming in, and the other one is a reflection. Because we wanted these circular openings, but we didn't want the expense of a circular skylight, and so it's a very, very cheap square skylight, which we didn't size properly because the idea was that you wouldn't see the actual face of the skylight. But it was too small, alas, and so we looked at it and thought, oh, let's just put some mirrors on it. And so now when the sun comes in, there is the actual sun and then the reflected sunlight, which is fantastic. Every room has a different orientation, including the landlocked bathroom, which has, on the ground floor, which has a skylight that snakes all the way up to the roof past the second floor, because, again, that is our obsession of trying to play with scale, play with where we are in terms of our physical space versus where we are in terms of our broader context, which is what we've been trying to do and capture in this book that is outside, and I will happily sign more books, but now maybe I'll stop talking and take some questions. Thank you for listening.
Hello. Thank you so much, first of all, for coming in to give the lecture. It was really wonderful. My question is geared towards your New York housing projects. Are the height restrictions for those determined by the city? Like, how do you decide when to stop going up?
Oh, very much determined by zoning.
Okay.
Yes. Determined by zoning, the district that you are in, where on the street you are, because you can, be taller if you're on the corner. It's absolutely determined by zoning.
Do you typically go as high as you're allowed to, just to maximize space? Or,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, always, right? You have to maximize space. We lucked out on Carmel Place because, in terms of the ceiling height, because, typically you would do 8 feet, right? But even if we did 8 feet, we couldn't squeeze in another floor. And so we maximize volume and pushed, the ceiling as tall as we could.
Thank you.
Mimi, in the last house that you showed, the cross-laminated timber, it's fascinating, and I'm trying to learn more about it myself now. How do you insulate that? How does that meet the energy code? So if the outside wall
It's on the outside. The insulation is on the outside.
Okay, so it's not just a 3-inch thick wall, there's actually insulation as well on the outside?
On the outside, yeah.
Underneath your live
Yeah.
ledge? Oh.
Yeah. I was saying that there's no kind of cavity for, typical things like electrical wiring and things like that.
Right.
But outboard of that is 6 inches of rigid insulation.
6 inches, okay.
6 inches, yeah. It's very, very quiet. The other thing that we have learned is that it's very quiet if you're inside the house in terms of the outside. It is very live inside the house because that wall cavity is very good for acoustics. So this is a lesson that we have learned. We have to figure out something else, we wanted, this one was, we were trying to be, the goal was to build a house like a physical model, like really simple, really, really simple. But, in order to solve the acoustic problem on the inside, we'd have to maybe add some layers or something. Because, yeah.
And where was that secret 2% or whatever of drywall that we didn't see?
The bathroom. The bathroom, because they were like, please don't make me, hook this sink up to the CLT wall because I need some tolerance. The wet wall of the bathroom, that's it.
Good job.
You had a question?
Hi, thank you for the lecture. I have a question not really directly related to the project themselves, but rather like the videos that you show. I'm wondering, because I noticed that you show like 2 footage of one of like the fabrication in the factory, the other is like the fabrication process of the house on the site, and also like another video of transporting the modular houses to the site. And I'm wondering, like those footages, did you guys take it yourselves? And is it more just a documentary, or do you also treat it more as like a representation medium as part of the project? I think the reason for the question is because I think the video of the transportation feels very much like a film or like a very like a stage footage. With like the titles and like the time at the bottom. So I'm just curious. Thank you.
I love your question. Such a good question. All of the above is the answer. That footage that I showed you of the truck and the setting process is a documentary film because we realized that we should be making a film. Because it was such a unique project. And so I think maybe during CDs, we reached out to a filmmaker whose work we admired and invited him all the way from Finland to come and witness some of the construction, etc. And then there are other videos, like the one in the factory or the one of the house. Those are the contractor, but almost always we now, not necessarily, always before, but now we almost always ask the contractor, can you set up a camera? Can we set up a camera? Because to us it's fascinating. We are trying to add video to the long list of, things that we do to try to capture design and how a building is inhabited and how it ages, etc. So now, the movie that I showed you from for Jones Beach, that was commissioned by MoMA. That filmmaker did 2-minute clips of every project in the show, and it was really funny because I met him after he'd finished it, after the opening, and he said, "You were the only architects that I didn't talk to before I shot. All the other architects were calling and, being, our usual, micromanaging selves, and you guys, for, whatever, we couldn't hook up and, so I thought, that's just brilliant, like, you should just do this, for our other projects." So now we have invited him in, retroactively to film some of our other projects because, we're always talking about change. It's just different durations of change that we're interested in. It might be day to night or whatever it is, one use scenario to another use scenario, or, how it weathers. And so now we're kind of doing it much more intentionally as a way to capture our projects. But before it's built, we are doing the living drawings. We are, sometimes it's a kind of 2D drawing, sometimes it's more of, an elevation that, shows how the landscape might grow in or shows how the shadow might play against the elevation. So we are doing that ourselves. And then we are, hopefully going to be continuing this relationship with the filmmaker. And we've just, we send them out and we just say, you did such a great job the first time. We're not going to even talk to you, we're just going to see what you come back with. But it's also a very intentionally still camera that I really, really like, that not much needs to happen with the camera. He's just watching everything else happening. So it's been a really fun conversation to have.
I think buildings are alive.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're not static, and I think when we look at books are
Yeah.
static. So I think your question of something is actually being documented, I think is something that we as architects should actually think about, because buildings are changing constantly. They're reacting to the life that is happening inside and happening outside, right?
Yeah.
So there is change, and that change cannot be documented through a publication that when we look at it.
Yeah. We are very, very inspired by this publication by MVRDV simply called Buildings. And it is all of their work retroactively in a book where all of the photography is post-occupancy. It's like by the inhabitants or by the client or whatever. And Natalie de Vries wrote an incredibly beautiful foreword talking about exactly that, how buildings are alive, and we're so, so inspired by that book, because, and we've always loved the work of Lacatan and Vassal, and they also, when they photograph, they don't ever stage it, right? They go in, and we tried with the last house, but of course, we're who we are, and we couldn't deal with like too much mess, we tried to leave a little bit, but Lacatan and Vassal's photography, I think also it feels like the person just walked out of the frame a minute ago because their socks are still there.
Yeah, let's continue that conversation tomorrow morning at Kina Court at 9 a.m. In case of coffees, you're uninvited to come. So maybe
Thank you, Petra.
come and, yeah, thank you, Mimi, so much.
Thank you.